Hi, host Eric here, and I'm the host talking with famous people, and I want to talk about this very interesting topic here. It's interesting in for a couple of different reasons and in a couple of different ways. And the presented hypothetical is Richard Dawkins. Let's use him. I think he's dead, but that's fine. Richard Dawkins has has left a secret hidden vault where it's to be revealed some years after his death, and in it is a set of documents, the most damning set of documents in the world. Oh, he's still alive? Oops. Sorry, Richard Dawkins. Don't mean to kill you off. And it proves definitively, in no uncertain terms, that cognitive functions are nonsense. MBTI is nonsense. Personality types are nonsense. Yada 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 yada. What would I do? Well, number one, I would say for the hypothetical to be meaningful in a way of developing thinking about it, we'd have to say instead of it proving cognitive functions, I think, wrong, that it would provide an alternative that renders the cognitive function theory obviously moot. It's hard to say a theory like cognitive functions can be wrong because it's not a theory. It's a taxonomy. You can taxonomy a given set of data in multiple ways, and some of those taxonomies will be more elegant and some of them less elegant. Some will be more useful in terms of working as providing guidance as to how to work through the different ideas and stuff, right? But it's not, they're not, you can't disprove a taxonomy. Because while it does make a bunch of model prediction type things, like if it says, well, okay, we know that you're using this cognitive function because we have all these correlates that relate to it in certain mechanical ways, and we can deduce its existence from the fact that these mechanics occur around these pivot points. Um, just because you can't see exactly what it's pivoting, you can see everything is pivoting around it, and it's obvious all that stuff's obviously pivoting around something. So that's sort of like the justification for the model. It's hard to imagine disproving something like that because the claims, like for example, the claims I make about what those things are more or less non-falsifiable claims. I say that a cognitive function is just a manner of attention or a a way of valuing certain kinds of meaning as the process of identity construction, both conscious and subconscious, that each individual human undergoes throughout their life. Okay, let's just say that the environment is the only factor for personality. Okay, well, has anyone attempted to empirically test children's type and a correlation with parents? I don't think establishing a genetic link would be very strong evidence of anything. It would just be evidence that people are similar natures have are similar at a greater rate to genetically similar people than they are to non-genetically similar people. It doesn't really say much. It's that sort of thing you can prove because of the nature of the claims being made. So, but if somebody disproved the model, then to me, it would sound like a better model that supplants this model or that renders it moot, like I said. I can't imagine what that would be because if I could, I'd already be using that new model.
So Richard Dawkins in this hypothetical scenario would have to provide a better alternative model that is just really solid.
And then if he did, what I would do is begin talking about that model instead. I'm saying, oh, good news, everybody, this model's better. I wouldn't view it as a defeat. I don't view myself as attached to MBTI or personality typing at all. I'm actually interested in it. I think it's interesting. I think it explains human differences better than other models I've encountered, and I've encountered shitloads of them. One wouldn't have expected it to be found something, a tool of understanding human behavior that's so powerful to be found in what most people deem pop psychology. But it's not because that's the only place I looked. I looked for, I've researched all kinds of shit forever. I always read random shit. And most of it's on Google Scholar. Like it's like highfalutin half super high math and half philosophy with a little bit of super high physics in it. But I don't get the hard parts of the math and the physics, or at least I don't want to learn how to do it or anything. I try to make the philosophy prime. I try to render in all those situations where I'm dealing with stuff that's where those things align, which they always do at the top, philosophy, physics, and math. Um, I I win those framings for sure because I want to make sure that math and physics know their place. That that they gain that any knowledge they're adding is it supervenes upon philosophy's understanding of it first. What would be happier to you? Oh, I don't care. I don't care about that. I care about some things, but I'm not. The things I care about are not static representations of things like that. I don't care if I'm arguing that I I'm not I'm not advocating MBTI. I'm not advocating cognitive function model. I'm talking about stuff using that model to explain stuff that I think is interesting, which is basically motivations for human behavior and explanations for how consciousness manifests differently in different people, how disputes erupt, how people can't come to agreement even when it would seem like they're looking at the same thing right in front of the same face, and yet they one of them says it's a pig and the other one says it's a planet. Epidemiology? It says study of diseases? You, I think you may have meant epistemology. But what would you think of your SI? How would you explain your bad memory then? My bad memory is not exactly what it appears to be. It's not exactly a bad memory. It's it's a it's a willingness to shift the zoomed in frame of reference without first zooming out again. So I can be in the middle of having fun playing Monopoly, and then you go, "Hey, would you like to play a hand of blackjack?" And I just, without even realizing I've moved from the Monopoly table, suddenly find myself playing blackjack. Right? There's there's that element to it, which is not exactly a bad memory thing, so much as a uh, what they call a object field issue. Uh, the 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 immersion of an object in a field is one element of human consciousness. How immersed you are in the moment versus how attentive and cautious you are. So the thing about that is I think that it correlates primarily with whether you have a judging function or a perceiving function in your dominant slot, right? I think that perceiving functions in the dominant slot mean that you are heavily field immersion prone. And you need to have the capacity to both immerse in a field, in other words, forget about the pulling back and looking at the big picture, so that you can do the kind of detail level work that was required for the big picture to work right. And then you also need to pull back from that sometimes and focus on making sure the big picture stuff works. Everybody is going to probably overvalue one or the other. Right? At the very least, people are going to have different relationships with those things. And my relationship with it is what's referred to as scatterbrained or head in the clouds or something, which means I'm extremely prone to field immersion. And if I want to not engage in it, I've got to be more mindful. Smoking lots of pot it makes me more field immersive, not less. That's why that's really why I smoke marijuana, is because it allows me to start on shit. I get immersed in the field of the thing I'm doing, and I just roll with it. And once I'm going, I roll with it. It makes me less restless, in other words. So there's that element. And you say here, oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. I feel like if you are always focusing on logical frameworks, it means that you haven't focused on social frameworks. Our brains are neuroplastic. We learn and forget methodologies and modes of cognition. Well, I mean, I think you can them out, right? So there's no reason that you can't both highly value non-logical frameworks and fit that valuing of non-logical frameworks and the corresponding non-logical frameworks into your logical framework, right? That's not there's nothing wrong with that. You're necessarily going to have some sort of meta logic to the whole thing. It might as well be a good one. Well, I know. Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, right, exactly. That's the thing about cognitive functions. That's the fucking point right there, is what you're making there. Now I understand what you're saying. It, it is a proportionality issue. It's a what amount of the total is exerted, of the finite total is spent on, and then you got 1 through 8, right? Those are the valuings or the perspectives. The the reason that values or perspectives definition falls a little short is because, of course, it doesn't adequately distinguish between the very different natures of perceiving and judging functions. So, but yeah, I agree with the proportionality thing. In my opinion, it's just a sort of throw shit against the wall. It feels like it's the right number. It goes 8 to 1, where it's 8 times as often will I be using NE, quote unquote, either engaged in basically free form NE perception, or um, having TI and NE working together to do something like this, right? I'll do that, spend 8 times as much time doing that as I will doing SI stuff. And I'll spend twice as much time doing that as I will doing TI stuff. And twice as much time as that as FE. Like that. I think it works like that. Like a GPU? You need a
Graphics processing unit.
graphics processing unit. You need a specific framework. You can't mix two engines together. Right. Bye, Teacup Noir. Thanks for showing up. Really appreciate it. And nice chatting with you. Pleasure. Anyway, the GPU, the graphics processing unit, you need a specific framework. You can't mix two engines together. Yeah, you need a meta framework, right? Because I I have to have some way of not only understanding that I have different sets of ideas that I use in different circumstances, but I also have to understand that knowing that and attending to this matter of how I balance and bounce between various frameworks is itself a skill set that I need to learn and master, and that it will do the most in terms of informing all the other skill sets, because that's the highest level of meta, right? That line of argumentation goes. If you look at savants, most have major deficits in other cognitive processes like memory or vision. Well, I mean, I do think that unbalanced brains are going to display more flashy, right? That I'm so audio and so not visual. I wouldn't want it to be more balanced, because if it were a little more balanced, I'd still be super shitty at visual. I'd just be a little less naturally good at audio. So, I'd rather, for me, I'd rather have really good pitch and really good other audio stuff and be really shitty at drawing pictures than to be more towards the middle in both in general. But it's not necessarily the case for all dichotomies, but it is for that one. Yeah, it is hard to say that specific modes for processing don't exist. I think a good way to introduce this question or this point, if you're engaged in some sort of actual debate about it, is to say, well, my point is simply this, that everything you can describe about your human experience will describe something that falls in a general category of intuition, thinking, feeling, or sensations in your body. Do you agree with that or wrong? You think something that doesn't fall in those categories? And then at that point, once you said that, now you put the ball in their court, because they have to provide an example of something that's not intuition, thinking, feeling, or sensing. That's pretty fucking hard. If you can come up with one, you could say, well, a rock's not any of those things. A rock's not those things. We say, yeah, a rock is sensing. We sense the rock. That's what we're experiencing. We're not experiencing the rock. We're experiencing our sensations of the rock. Okay, but the thing is, there's no doubt that we have many other processes, but make them do that first. I'm not saying we only have those. I'm saying that's how you get them started down the right road, because then they think that's where you're going. See, there's nothing there but those four things. But once they start doing that, first of all, visual is sensory. I don't know about the other ones. Maybe you're right, but the point is, that's the idea. Is okay. So what makes these words that you use to describe cognitive processes more legitimate than these other words that I'm using to describe cognitive processes? That's why you go there, because when they finally do come up with one, you make them say why their thing is more real than yours. In other words, you haven't begged the question, but you've led them down the road of begging the question to cause them to have to deal with this fact. Simulation of a fly's brain. Well, I haven't heard of it. It sounds like a very, very boring computer game. You have a choice. Fly or eat. Fly.
You're forgetting the secret option C, which is just be a dick.
Right.
That's what flies also do.
Eric's foot. They really are awful creatures. They land on me. They'll land on the same spot like 5 times. You'll shoo them off that same spot, and they'll land back on there. And the 5th time, you'll just have to be like, ah!
I respect flies a little bit more than I do like gnats, because flies at least want to live. Gnats will just try to fly into your eyeball repeatedly, and you'll shoo them away, and you'll try to kill them, and it's like, doesn't matter.
Right.
Flies, those are like, you know what, I got better things to do. It goes off somewhere else, it like gets a hobby or something.
Well, I mean, flies are daredevils. Gnats are just like, just fuck it, take me now, I'm a gnat. Maybe next time I'll do better. Let me go land on your sweat, that way I'll get stuck there. And when you go like this, you'll smash me. But flies give you sport, right? I've got my fly swatter here, and they are daredevils. They will land on my foot, I will try to hit it with this, and he'll get away the first time. Cocky fucking bastards. They'll come back and land on the same foot again. Eventually I'll get them.
Yeah. So sorry for derailing there. Barry says no, they are programming a computer brain with CPUs I'm guessing to something to have to do with the fly brains or whatnot.
Well, I mean, I think the programming of simulations to replicate brain activity, if you were gonna try to do it by putting together a bunch of mechanisms plus inputs, right? Inputs and mechanisms and outputs. So it's like, okay, we want it so this thing gets input through the following ways, and then um, you want it to behave like a fly or something, right? Then you have to have different nodes in the system and have each of those nodes running concurrently doing different things. And then the consciousness would be sort of a node prioritizer. Like, well, do I prioritize fear of getting hit by a fly swatter right now? Or do I prioritize the delicious flavor of Eric's foot? Right. Well, I mean, it's not a consciously made, clearly worded decision the flies have, but if you move around them too much and give them an indication that you're going to hit them with the fly swatter, they do tend to not sit there and wait for you to hit them, right? So that indicates that in this instance they are trying to balance between two conflicting values. One, their desire to remain on my foot, versus two, their desire to live. And so it's like those things have to be done the way I think to model it well would be what I was just said about, like, you have a node that's dealing with wanting to eat stuff only, and and for many of the stimuli that come in through the brain, that node stays on passive receive mode. And then if you see something coming in that is food related, it kicks in and gives you some sort of degree of strength. Like it's a food option processing thing. It goes, yep, actually, yeah, I think that is food. It smells really good food. You better go over there right now. I have this great, 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 great food. Now that node's screaming off little sirens and shit. But they've got other nodes that are telling them other things. And the extent to which those things are active or in passive receive mode depends on the stimuli. And then the actual action that comes out at the end is there's some sort of weighting mechanism that says, well, even though these things are measured in different units, I can determine what I want to do based on their relative strengths to one another. And that thing that we're talking about there, that's what you call agency or free will or sentience or something like that. Okay, well, I can't click that while we're recording, but maybe I can since I have the browser already open. It's a scientist guy? A real scientist? Does he wear a lab coat? That's how you know they're a real scientist.
In a picture, he's wearing a business suit.
That's no scientist. Sounds like a businessman to me. MD. I'm not impressed by your MD, Mr. Scientist Businessman. Let's see.
See,
What
we know that Bill Nye was a real science guy because he had on a lab coat and a bow tie. That was like double seal the deal.
And he changed his last name from Nye to Nye the Science Guy. That's also how you know. Now look at Dr. Leaf. He graduated from Yale College. Really impressive. With a BA in mathematics. Great. Oh, he went to Harvard Medical School. Likely story. And you're a practicing psychiatrist with specialties in geriatric psychiatry and neuropsychiatry. In fact, he was a pioneer in geriatric psychiatry, building some of the first geriatric medical psychiatry hospital units and the largest geriatric treatment network in New England which he has directed for 20 years. He is a specialist in the interface of psychiatry, neurology, and medicine.
After
All
20
right.
years, after 20 years of geriatric psychiatry, he finally figured out which the patients preferred, tapioca pudding or chocolate.
Is that what he was studying the whole time, huh? He was like, okay, I keep almost solving these people's problems, and then they all die. I've had 7 therapy sessions. She was just about to get better, and then she dies. I don't know what's going on here. It's because they're super old, dude. Really? Is that what's happening here? That's what geriatric means, by the way. It means you're old. I wouldn't want to do any kind of medical treatment that involved populations that died a lot. I don't want to be an ontologist. That's
Like goldfish.
You don't want to do that. I don't want to be a pediatric ontologist. That sounds like the worst job in history. Like goldfish. I heard you say that and I thought, like goldfish. And I just kept going forward because I had no idea what the fuck you were talking about. But I agree with it anyway. It's exactly like goldfish. Now, the end. What was I saying? I don't even remember. Whatever I was saying, that's what I'd say about it. Oh, geriatric medicine guy. That's right. Look at his face. I'm looking at his face. That's a handsome devil. That is one good-looking man.
He looks so friendly, man.
I know. I like him already. I want to go up and
That's,
give him a
that's
hug.
how it gets you. That's how it gets you. You're like, oh, he looks reliable and dependable.
Update on interface of immunity and brain. He seems dependable, I agree. T helper cells. And then let's see what else it says. Epigenetic signals regulate new brain cells. Relatively small numbers of new neurons are produced in several critical parts of the adult human brain. The most well understood region is the dentate nucleus of the hippocampus, where new neurons are incorporated into memory circuits for new information that clarifies old memories. Huh. That's interesting. Okay, Mr. Doctor Guy, I guess you get to be called an expert. You sound like you really know what you're talking about. I don't like experts, but fine. You do sound
John Leaf, the science queef. That'll be his.
Yeah,
his
John
thing.
Leaf, the science queen. That's great. You should send him a postcard indicating that would be a good name for him. Yeah, I'm impressed by his fancy words, right? The powerful immune synapse. Cells communicate with many varied signals. Both chemical and electrical signals can be secreted in the space between cells into the bloodstream and in cerebrospinal fluid.
Is that anything? I don't know.
Chemical signals can be sent in small vehicles, endosomes, or in nanotubes that exist between most cells. Another way that cells talk is by forming ... dots. They form ellipses together, and that's how they communicate. They're always
It's pretty effective.
And the rest, like that.
Yeah, I quite like his article on fungus, particularly. And there's a lot of information I was unaware about, like how funguses are actually quite badass and have very vast networks where they function almost like a brain.
You mean out in the world, or in the human, or inside of humans? Which one are you talking about?
Out in the world, like they have vast fungal networks, like in forests and stuff.
Yeah, vast fungal networks. I usually start with that when I'm talking to a girl. I'm trying to impress her about why she should go out with me. So I say, well, let me start with my vast fungal networks. They begin on my feet and extend outward. I can communicate right now. The fungus on my feet is talking to the fungus in Canada right now.
It's pretty cool, man.
That's how vast my fungal network is. Well, interested that I'm interested in high brainy kind of things in general because I think fungi are a way of understanding that consciousness needn't necessarily have come out the way it did, right? In terms of
And also,
being segmented out into distinct entities, it could be segmented out into one big long entity, like that. You're saying?
yeah, Hoster, he had an interesting thing about ant colonies and how, like, ants, they actually do have individual, like, personalities, but whenever there's something that requires experience, the ants will defer to the most experienced ant in the little scout party for, like, pointers on what to do.
Have they determined how they know which ant is most experienced?
They communicate with their antenna and chemicals and stuff.
Dude, ants are badass. I saw something where I think it was like a praying mantis or something was attacking their colony, and it's like they all rush up, overpower it, and then just very lightly just sever its head and then drop it on the ground and it's just back to business. I was like, what the heck?
I have a praying mantis on my marijuana plant. I saw him today again for the first time in a long time. I saw him for a while when he was little, and then I kind of lost track of him. He's hard to see. He blends right in. I saw him. He's quite big, quite a bit bigger now. I'm pretty sure it's the same guy because I see him occasionally. And I'm pretty sure it's the same one. And I very much appreciate him being there because, of course, he'll eat the other bugs. I don't have ant problems with that. But ants communicating via their antennae about their experience level or via their chemicals about their experience level. So if you were to ask this question about human beings, right? Like, well, how do they know? Because it's probably true to a much lesser degree, I'm sure not nearly strong correlation, but it's probably true to some extent as well for humans that if you have groups who encounter uh, an unusual situation, that there's going to be some pattern of deference going on, and how that plays out is really hard to explain. If you were a different species, that difference wouldn't ever be spoken about explicitly. You wouldn't be able to find the words that said, okay, now you're going to defer to her and you'll defer to me, and you won't really defer, but you won't give me any resistance. And I'll interpret that to mean this, and blah, 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 blah. Right?
Here's what I'm wondering. Oh, I'm sorry. You're continuing with something.
That's it.
Right?
That's it.
Okay. With the ants, how do you know that it's not that who they're deferring to just happens to be an ant that happens to have experience on the matter? There might be another ant in the group that has more experience, but that was the first ant to basically speak up. And so since that was the first ant to speak up, the other ant that might know more is saying, well, yeah, let's just go with him because he seems like he knows what he's talking about.
It could be a high stress, high pressure situation where someone's got to take charge fast.
Right, so even though another ant might know more, the one that's able to take charge the fastest is the one that's deferred to.
It could be their facial expressions. Like, Joe just looks more confident. he's walking around with an extra bit of swagger. I mean, if pushed in humans to provide more details about how you know something like that, how you intuit something like that, you just go, well, and you can point things like, see how he's quiet, he's not really talking very much loudly or talking to the people around him very much, but he's there, but he's not, like, they're responding to him and he's not responding to them, kind of thing. I mean, I could point out a lot of different things, but all those things would fall apart. You could give counterexamples. They say, well, Eric, I think you present fairly dominant in that group over there or something of this group that you're standing with over there, but you're loud. And you say he's dominant because he's quiet. I don't understand. Why? Because it's a holistic thing you're reading. It's like, well, quiet for him in that context is why it's complicated.
Well,
Probably the same thing with
I
ants.
mean, like with the ants, it might seem like they're all deferring to one or a couple of ants, or however it works. But it might be that that's in a way like the head of the snake, to use a metaphor. Like that happens to be the what's seen as like that's the coordination of the ants seen in an extroverted sense, whereas there might be supporting ants doing something like being on the edge and keeping the other ants corralled in together and telling them don't go over this way, stay in that way, or something, and sort of corralling them. I mean, like there could be different ants filling different functions that aren't necessarily seen as leader functions, but they're still necessary for holistic working.
Or perhaps they aren't deferring, they're actually the aggressors, and an ant world making the decisions is something reserved for the most loathsome of disrespected ants.
Maybe, I don't know.
I think the deference thing, of course, is so it puts such a human spin on a behavior, to say that some ant defers to another. I like it. I like the poetry of it, but I'm just saying, do ants really defer?
It's just behavior that's been witnessed when people like watch ants do things over long periods of time.
Okay, but so fine, I get that. There's elements in the behavior that have prompted them to choose to use that word. But see, that's what I want to know what that is, right? Like, there's pointing some behavior and saying that's deference. But there's so many different ways you could interpret that behavior, and deference is just a pretty loaded word, I guess. I don't know. Let's see what this article says. This ant travels hundreds of meters in zigzag paths to find food, but can find its way to its nest over a different route despite the near lack of landmarks. So they don't get straight there, but they can come straight back. Interesting. Because when they're looking for food, they're looking for food. They're not trying to go to a specific place. But when they're coming back, they're trying to go to a specific place. There were several plausible explanations, but these guys did some experiments and they ruled out the use of visual cues, time, or energy. For instance, the ants were tested on uniformly gray and smooth surroundings, but the ants unerringly found their way. The evidence is consistent with ants having a built-in odometer that performs a complicated mathematical operation called path integration. That is, the journey is divided into small vectors, each with a certain length and direction, and they are added to give a homing vector that gives the direction and total distance to the nest. But what about bumps in the terrain, which would be like hills and valleys to the ants, and cause the ant to walk further than on totally flat ground? To find out, the researchers trained groups of 21 ants on trails with many symmetrical tall hills and deep valleys, to the ant scale, to locate a food source that would take them 8.7 meters to walk, but which is only 5.2 meters of ground horizontal distance away. Then they transformed the intervening terrain to a flat surface. The ants then walked a far shorter distance, which was very close to the ground distance, and vice versa. When 17 ants were trained on flat terrain to find a food source 5.2 meters away and the terrain transformed into hills and valleys, the ants walked a distance very close to the 8.7 meters. So they ruled out the possibility they were using only the uphill or only the downhill paths by performing similar tests on asymmetric hills. This means the ants apparently calculate the horizontal projection of the distance traveled. That is, the image of the ant's travel vectors is projected onto an imaginary flat screen under the ant's terrain, and the path integration is performed on this XY plane. To do this, ants must have a way of estimating the slopes and multiplying the travel distance by the cosine of the angle of inclination to work out the corresponding ground distance. The ants probably use the internal sense called proprioception, which animals and humans use to determine the location of their body parts. Ants probably measure slopes by the same means as they sense gravity, i.e. by proprioceptors on various joints between moving parts. There are a number of hair plates, and there may be some backup design, so one might take over another's function if it is surgically removed. This makes it hard to determine the exact mechanisms involved in precisely determining ground distance. The alternative mechanism to horizontal projection is the even more elaborate three-dimensional path integration, which the researchers plan to investigate. Well, that's fascinating. That is really
This can do
fascinating.
math, man.
That's great. I love that. Well, I mean, the thing is, I tend to see things entirely in terms of analogies, right? So this works as an analogy in lots of different ways. I haven't even begun to unravel them all, but like the fact that by modulating it out, you wash out um, inconsistencies because they all collapse down. You know what I'm saying? That's that thing I got to think about it more so I can explain it better. But there are certain systems that wash out little details and certain systems that magnify little details. So this system is one way to wash out details purposely in order to get the gist of something to actually be more detail precise in the execution of it. That's super cool.
And I found the other article that's talking about ants and experience. And apparently, through observation, like it shows from this colony of ants, Temnotherax albipennis, apparently ants that have more experience, like not age, but experience, are more likely to get sent out on runs and have low followers or lead expeditions and stuff.
I see. They value SI.
It's value SI, confirmed.
Probably a bunch of SJs.
Interesting. Okay, so ants are SI in the dominant slot, we're going to say. They're followed up by TE. I think there's two kinds of ants. There's SITE and there's TESI. And then after that, they get either NI. Wait, it goes. Let's say it goes SITE, then it would go FI, and then NE. Yeah. Well, actually, I think ants are ISTPs. I think they're TI because they've got lots of abstractions about what they're doing. Okay, maybe ants are just SISE. That's it. Just first they're SI, then they're SE, or first they're SE and then they're SI. Let's go get some food. No, let's do what he's doing. He's done this before. Okay, let's go back now. Okay.
What about the ant queens? Do they possibly have personality? Be quite interesting.
I think they're the INFPs of the ant world. The ants figured out what to do with the INFPs. They're like, okay, look, if she's gonna be fussy and she's gonna be demanding, then let her just sit there, but she's got to constantly pump out babies. that that's how INFPs should frame their life. They should think to themselves, I'd like to be an ant queen. I want to sit in an anthill and pump out babies and be fed ant treats. Now, most INFPs would probably tell you, I don't want to just sit there and pump out babies. Well, the thing is, Ant Queen, it doesn't occupy much of her attention to pump out the babies. What do you think she does the rest with all of her free time then? She draws, she plays the guitar, she has loved ones always coming in and loving her, telling her how great she is, giving her food and shit. And then
Yeah, and then she can also tear off the wings of the male ants so that they can't run away from her.
right, yeah, she's got complete control of everything. And the great thing is, all the ants love her so much that she doesn't need to worry about their feelings so much. And so it's really perfect. Yeah. Any other thoughts about any of this stuff? I don't. I like this ant topic a lot. I don't know if that's where we started. This is I'm sure it's not. It's a 45-minute long video. Thanks for watching.